Hey, I'm just going to give you a little synopsis of a few odd things about my life and some of the things that I've been through to give you a better understanding of who I am as a person. So, I was the firstborn son of a family. It really has no significance to me as far as the firstborn son goes, but in my bloodline, it does. I was the second largest baby in a hospital. I was 10 pounds, over 10 pounds, rather large baby, had a large skull. Um, I came out feet first with my umbilical cord tied around my neck, and I had a blue face. I was suffocating at that point, and my mother took 36 hours to give birth to me. Thank you, Mom. Sorry, sorry. 36 hours of labor, quite the ordeal. So yeah, I was second biggest baby in the hospital. One of the things that you'll find in the spiritual realm is that the dark side will have a tendency of trying to take out a child before they're even born, or along the way as a child they will, if they know that they're to be doing good things. So that's something that you won't find in literature or text anywhere or anything like that. When it comes to the spiritual realm, between good and evil, the demons will try to take out the children they know that have some sort of specific purpose, goal, existence to fulfill in their lifetime. And it's something that has been marked on the person before they were born, from what I understand. And that's something that I've seen in just observation through my life. So that's just blatant observation, and being able to take my comparative analysis of things that I've looked at when it came to the physical realm and being able to transfer it over into the spiritual realm. That's something that I've seen and has been something that has come true a few times in my life. So I've seen it enough to know that it's an observation. Can't call it a fact, but I would put money on that bet. I never crawled. I just got up one day and started walking. I never got on my hands and knees. I never begged, right? I never begged. I just got up and started running around. That's kind of a developmental step. My parents were a little concerned about that. They went and tried to force me to crawl, and I just wouldn't do it. And they called it the doctor concern. The doctor said that's fine. Just keep an eye on him and make sure he doesn't do anything else unusual as far as his developmental processes go as time goes on as he grows up. Um, my first words were a large descriptive phrase. It was a couple different words, and I'm not going to say what they were, but they were fairly large words. My brother did the same thing. He was nonverbal till he was in his third year, and then he said a 5-word sentence, and it was a complete 5-word sentence. Those were his first words. So it's kind of an odd thing. Have to do with our genetics, I would say, of who we are as people. I was When I was young, I lived out in the country. We lived out in the country most of our whole lives, and because of that, we were on a well. My parents had fed me fluoride pills at a very young age, and the reason that I know it was a fact, I was very young, so it was hard to remember. But I remember the color of the pill, the size and shape of the pill, the taste of it, and I remember not wanting to take it whatsoever. And both of my parents have denied that to this day, that they ever gave me those pills. And I kind of wondered what was going on with that. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Another thing that had happened to me in my early teenage years is that I had a whole bunch of fillings put in, of amalgam fillings, which are full of mercury. And that's another key step I'll discuss as time goes on during this video. Most of my schooling was kind of a review after I'd gotten through junior high. I mean, the mathematical skills that I had developed by the time I was in 8th, ninth grade had taken me all the way up to pre-calculus, calculus classes. Same with my English. My mom was an English teacher, so what I hadn't gotten in school for English, I got at home from mom. And math, when I took the ASVAB in my senior year, the decoding, which is just a series of numbers and picking out patterns along other different tests, I got a perfect score on that. And so perfect 100%. I made no mistakes on that part of the test, and that was something that the military had really wanted to grab me and toss me in the military at that point in time. Every branch came out looking to snag me because of that one score. And so what I had done over the course of the last couple decades after I'd gotten out of school is I kind of learned to take that physical realm sense and looking at things as far as numbers and patterns go, and I've been able to take that and look at things in the spiritual realm. So I consider that kind of an advantage as well as a disadvantage because of the way my mind works a million miles an hour. What I like to do is try to calm myself down, meditate, and think about things, and things will just come to me. Yeah, I was a walking graphing calculator in high school. So back to the fluoride and the mercury. I want to say that I had some gift at some point in time when I was young, because when you take fluoride, it dumbs down that extrasensory perception. The same thing with mercury, it dumbs down an extrasensory perception. Those are like the two main things that you would give to a person to damage their pineal gland or part of their brain, whatever part of their brain that helps with extrasensory perception. One of the things that most people don't recognize and know is that left-handed people use the right hemisphere of their brain, which is the creative side. It's also the side of the brain that helps open up the extrasensory perceptions. So left-handed people who are more creative and artistic have a tendency of having what you would call ESP or some extrasensory perception. And I am left-handed, so between whatever kind of luck of the draw of me being born who I am, on top of being left-handed, on top of a lot of the other things that had occurred to me when I was young, it had given me some sort of, I don't know what to call it. I want to call it an extrasensory perception, but it's not really something that I have the ability of honing or directing. It's things. How do I say this? It's something that people typically call it a download. I don't know what to call it exactly. I guess you could say I have the ability to direct it. I'm working on figuring out how to direct it on a more meaningful way. So I'm assuming that at some point in time in my younger years, when I was speaking, I was saying things and then they would happen, something along the lines of that. I don't know. But it was enough to where I was fed fluoride, and then also my mouth was packed full of mercury. And I wasn't aware of this sort of thing until I had all of my mercury fillings removed out of my mouth. And I developed an herb and spice combination that I put in my food for a long period of time that helped decalcify my pineal gland with the fluoride and pull heavy metal out of the joints of my body. That's just a series of spices that helps pull it out of your joints, put it into your bloodstream, drive it through your filtration system, your kidney and your livers, and out through your bladder without causing damage. It's just a combination of spices, herbs, and vegetables. So after I had done that, I kind of had awoken a little bit more to my capabilities. After I had to read some books too. I had to read some books and understand what was going on, learn how to meditate. Kind of did a lot of soul searching, trying to figure out what was going on as far as that goes. So yeah, I don't want to call it psychic, but there's a book that I bought. It's a book that only was printed for 1 year, and there are countries that the book is not banned, but the practices in there are, and they're just simple practices. It's like stretching, it's like yoga and stuff like that. But there's countries that have banned that, and it's similar in the way in the United States. This is a CIA project. Back in the early 1900s, they stopped making they made all the children that were left-handed become right-handed as far as writing in the elementary schools go, and some of them developed stutters and like nervous tics and stuff like that because they went from left hand to right hand, and it affected their development. But that was the reason why is because the period in time the United States government had recognized that there were people with ESP, with extrasensory perceptions, and you could call psychic skills, whatever they might be, and they had recognized and done enough studying to know that left-handed people had a propensity to be psychic or have a higher chance of becoming psychic or have an ESP. And that's the whole reason why elementary schools, they took people and they made left-handed people become right-handed, because they did not want a large population of people who were spiritually awakened and able to do things that the government could not control. And so, MK Ultra projects and stuff like that, that's the same thing the Chinese government does with their thousands of kids. They try to make psychic. It's 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000. I don't know how many kids they test and how many actually come out to have some sort of psychic ability, but China has one of the largest programs for that out there, and the CIA did the same thing too. This is factual. I can tell you, this is factual. This is not a speculation. But yeah, MK Ultras, that's a real program. Whether they say it's fake or not, that's just disinformation. It's a real program. How the methodologies and the way that they teach the children and stuff like that, that's up to debate. Could be any different number of ways that they would do it. It could be just a child that is brought up in a family that you wouldn't even know. Could be something similar to, the same thing that happened to Mel Gibson in the movie Conspiracy Theory, where he got locked up and drugged and basically tortured in a chamber, and experimented on. So that's kind of something that you could be anything from that point to a regular childhood, just depending on the circumstances and what would you call experimentation. And I'm sure that China does the exact same thing as well, as far as what they do with their kids. The book that I had gotten, it's kind of interesting. There was only one year it was printed. There's only so many thousand that were made, and it was about psychic abilities. It's kind of hard to find, and if you find it, it's anywhere between $600 to like $500. So it's not a cheap. It's not. Excuse me, $60 to $500. It's not a cheap book at all. Yeah, the whole book was basically just anecdotes and stories of psychic children and what their capabilities were. In my mind, the entire book, except for about 5 or 6 pages, had no real significance to me, because it was all anecdotal observation of this circumstance and that circumstance. Somebody was moving Tic Tacs in and out of a container, silly stuff like that. And, psychically, they would like transport it in and out of the container, or they would take something from under the table and push it through the table, psychically transport it through the table, or they'd move something from in a box to outside of a box. They'd make a flower wilt, just simple things like that. Bend a spoon, like in the Matrix, just things like that. The 5 or 6 pages told you under the circumstances by which people would gain psychic abilities. Some of those were early childhood sickness, near death, childhood sickness, just near death experiences, starvation for a long period of time, like psychological abuse to the point of where you would kind of go almost insane. That would be another thing. Essentially, extreme forms of hardship that most people would either go crazy or not be able to physically survive. So that was the 5 or 6 pages that actually had some worthwhile understanding. When I was young, I had a fever of 105 and almost died from a disease. I had a fever of 105 for I don't know how many days. It was the limit in which you're supposed to be having that temperature without going to the hospital. So I'd had that temperature for long enough to where it was go to the hospital and force that temperature down, or risk something like brain damage. And that was funny, because my mom had told me that she was going to have to take me to the hospital if my temperature didn't go back down. And at that point I was 105 degrees. I was very weak. I could hardly get up and move around and hardly get to the bathroom, and I was hallucinating at times too. And after I'd heard that, I didn't want to go to the hospital. My temperature dropped. It was like I almost just pushed it down on my own. I said, no, I don't want to go to the hospital. I'm just gonna drop that temperature now. If I had that power. That's funny though. It's kind of funny. Mom told me that my temperature was too high. She's gonna have to take me to the hospital, and the temperature started going down shortly after that. So yeah, not a big fan of going to hospitals, right? One of the things that happened to me when I was younger, I went to jail and I got beaten half to death while I was in there. I was stuck in what they call a white torture room for 4 months. It was all one color except for the roof. The bunks were gray, the floor was gray, the walls were gray, everything was gray. We did have a couple windows where you could see out, but everything was gray in the room. There was a tank, there was a stainless steel sink, and there was a toilet, and there were some white tiles in the bathroom. But as far as the main room goes, every single thing was gray except for the roof and the light fixtures that were in there. But it was essentially what you would call a white torture room that the CIA used to torture, people that they wanted to interrogate. And so I was sleep deprived. People would come in the middle of the night and make noise, and so some of the people in the cell would keep me up at night, and I typically only got a couple hours of sleep a night for months and months and months. Yeah, I broke both my hands, my left jaw and my foot in there. My ankle was purple and green from half my knee down, and I couldn't walk on it for weeks on end. I had to rip 2 inches of the bottom of my towel and wrap my foot, hide it under my sock because I didn't want the people to know that I had, ripped up the towel. It's damaging jail property, and they get mad at you for doing that, even though they should have taken me to the hospital. The doctor, not the doctor, but the nurse, when I went to the nurse's office, like I said, my ankle was purple and green from half my leg down from my knee. And she told me it wasn't broken and I need to drink more water. She said, "You need to drink more water." So I went back to the cell, hobbled, couldn't walk on it. When you know it's broken when you can't put pressure on it. And so you hopped back over to my jail cell, and at the same time I had a broken jaw too. I didn't really complain about that. I just kind of talked through my teeth. But what I had to do every morning, I forgot how painful that was. The ankle was bad enough, but the jaw actually was worse. Every morning I have to take the spork, put it through my teeth, and then turn it sideways because I couldn't open my teeth far enough to actually turn the spork handle sideways. And then I would pry it open enough to where I could get like a piece of bread through my mouth and basically force the spork through my mouth. I couldn't get it open much more than that every morning for close to 2 months. I say close to 2 months. And that was a situation where it's at some point in time I probably should have been taken to the hospital and been checked out. Let me rephrase that: taken to the hospital and been inspected and treated well instead of left for dead. And that was one of the things that kind of made me realize that as far as the jail system goes, it's strictly for profit. I actually wrote a rap song about it. It's on my channel, YouTube, Jail for Profit. It's kind of a funny thing because I spelled profit like PROFIT, but it could also be taken like a seer or someone who has like future sight, foresight, whatever you want to call it, PROPHET. So jail for profit. It's kind of a funny joke, but not really. One of the main problems we have in the United States is that most of our jail systems are based for profit. They're privatized, so they want to keep people in jail for a certain number of days. They want to keep those bunks full so they can get paid per bunk. I don't know how many dollars they get paid per day per bunk. But that's basically I would say the biggest broken part of the system in the United States currently is how many people we have in jail. Out of the world, the United States holds 1 out of 5 people in jail. So the other 4 of 5 are all scattered throughout the rest of the world. And that should really tell you the perspective of where we're at. I think we're 3 to 5% of the population, yet we hold 20% of the people in jail. So that has been turned into a profitable endeavor for people who want to use people as tools to make money, basically, walking zombie status type of thing. But yeah, back to that. As I was beaten half to death. The guards didn't care. The nurse didn't care. The judge laughed at me. She was smiling and happy when she saw me hobble into the courtroom. I had boxing glove size hands. No one cared. but yeah, that was an experience that also heightened my awareness after I'd gotten out of jail. I kind of had become a little bit more aware as far as what you would call extrasensory perception goes, and I started seeing things on a whole different level. That was what I would say really awakened my spiritual path. But yeah, yeah, that's a little bit about me. I guess I could say, you know, so here's something that's interesting. When I was young, a lot of my friends had died, and most of them were firstborn sons. By the time I was in my, I don't know, early mid 20s, I wouldn't say most of them. I would say a large portion of the males that I knew. Almost no females I could think of except for one or two had died, but these were mostly firstborn sons. So I don't know what that tells you exactly. My next door neighbor, he he died at 27, which is the Hollywood curse of 27. His mother worked in a portion of Hollywood, and she used to wear owl pendants. So Moloch, worshiping the Bohemian Grove owl, Moloch, you sacrifice your firstborn son. So that was my next door neighbor, and I don't want to necessarily say that that was true of her to have participated in that. I doubt it, but you can kind of see the spiritual realm, the way things work. So that is a firsthand experience I have seen of somebody who wore owl pendants and lost their firstborn son at the age of 27 and had worked in the Hollywood sector. So you can kind of see exactly what I'm trying to say here is that I have firsthand experience of seeing someone very close to me that I cared about die from what a lot of people would call an urban legend. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that too. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that too, because this is where it gets hard, because after I got out of jail, he was one of the few people that actually called me in jail and wanted to make sure I was okay and everything. And he wasn't in a good way himself at the time, but he wanted, we were like brothers. He was like a little brother to me. And so he called me in jail to see how I was. And that was really, really cool of him. And after I got out of jail, he wanted me to come down there and see him because he was going through hell at the time. His sister was out in Oklahoma, and I guess she was with a guy that was, a troublemaker and whatnot. And he had slammed a door in her face, and she got stitches from it. And he was stealing her phone and selling it for this, that, and the other thing. And so he was freaking out because she was over there, basically being really mistreated, and he wanted me to come down there and go grab her and take her home, type of thing. And I wasn't able to leave at the time because of the fact that I was I wasn't on probation. So what had happened? So what had happened in the jail system is I had been beaten so badly that I had enough. And they wouldn't. That was another thing is on my inmate request forms. I had been asking for law books so I could study the case that I was fighting. And a lot of times they'll say that you're not allowed to have law books or something like that if you have a lawyer, but you have a right to assist your defense, which means you always have access to law books. It doesn't matter if you ask for a law book; it's your right. And so they can't actually deny that of you. It's one of your amendment rights. I asked for months. I kept writing it on my inmate request form. I asked the warden a dozen times, and I never got to see a law book once. So after I'd been beaten half to death, never got law books, was being deprived of sleep, stuck in a white torture room. The food was good. And some of the people in there were nice too. So that's a plus. But the faculty was like laughing at me being broken, and so was the judge at that point. And I had enough. So I had basically, they broke a federal law, and they're a county jail. So I let them know they broke a federal law and that the evidence was out of the building, and they were more than happy to negotiate with me at that point as far as letting me out of there with whatever you want to call it. They gave me counseling, essentially a mental health evaluation, counseling. Something that really bothered me too is when I got out of jail, the counselor that I'd met up with when I got out of jail, the first thing that she had done on day one was give me a 567 point questionnaire, multiple point questionnaire. So bubble, ABCD, bubble questionnaire. It took me like somewhere between 6 and 8 hours to finish. And so it's that is extremely counterproductive. It's 567 questions for someone who it's a mental health evaluation. I sat down and answered every question. I took the full day to do it, was mellow about it. But there's a lot of people with like ADHD and medical conditions and stuff that can't even do that. So I thought that was something that was what I would consider unfair to do right off the bat to anyone. Not to me, because I could handle it. But 500, I remember that because I'm good with numbers, is 567 questions. And you were expected to get it done in one day. So you get there early in the morning and you would spend the whole day there doing a mental health evaluation. I don't even know if a lot of people could handle that as far as holding your attention span for that long of a period. You're spending the whole day, answering questions. I mean, it can be done. I just think that for anyone who's taking a mental health evaluation, if they're wondering whether you have a mental health issue, that's not the way to go about it, because I would assume that more people show up having mental issues on that test than don't, just because of the functioning mechanisms of the way the test is administered, as well as the way the test is designed. My test came out fine. So that was something. But 567 questions is quite the multiple choice questionnaire test to be taking, especially for someone who's got a head problem. So yeah, when I had gotten out of jail, what they had required me to do was my lawyer, instead of getting probation, what was done was something special for me. Was my lawyer was to have me check in with him one time a week to make sure that I was following the procedures and things that I needed to do to complete the terms of release. And so I had done that. It took me about 6 months to do that. They wanted to get me into counseling shortly after I got out of jail, but it took me a couple months to stabilize my living arrangements and work on a profession of some sort. They told me I had to get a job, get a place to stay, and do some counseling along with a few other things. And so nobody would hire me. And that was the worst part, is that I didn't have a car at the time. I was walking around with a broken foot, leftover broken foot. It was limping. I still had problems with that. It took a couple of years for that to fully heal. And, for me to be able to walk on it without feeling like it was going to crunch and break. It's still kicked out sideways. I still have kind of what you would call a club foot. But I can run on it now, though. I can run on it. I can go walk miles. And so it's mostly recovered after 10 years. So no one would hire me when I got out of jail. So I had a little bit of money. I went and filed for a business license. And that appeased the court. I went and handed them a business license and showed that I was opening a business. And not bad. I think most people, when they get out of jail, they don't just go file for a business license right off the bat. And instead they get a job, and then they provide, paycheck stubs and stuff like that to make sure that they appease the court. That being said, that was kind of an experience that had made me a little bit more aware of my surroundings, of what people had to go through, and understand that I was one of the critical errors, I would say, in our society that we have, that we're 3 to 5% of the population in the United States, yet we hold 20% of the people in jail, of the world. 3 to 5% of the world population, and we hold 20% of people in jail. So that is a mega fail, if you ask me. It shows that rehabilitation is not cared about, and that's because the jails are privatized and they need to be immediately changed out, so it's not jail for profit. Anyways, that was something that I wrote a rap song. You can read the lyrics in the description of the song. It's another video I have out. I would really appreciate it if you looked at it. The song is wonky. I'm not very not very well versed as far as making music goes. So but I can write lyrics. I can definitely write lyrics. I can definitely rap. Play musical instruments and stuff like that too. It's my thing. So this is something that's interesting. If my neighbor had not died in the way that he did, and I did not understand the procedures by which he was essentially exterminated. He was considered probably a problem at some point in time. What happened is that he started doing. He was a big alcohol drinker, right? He was a big alcohol drinker, so he liked downers, and then he started switching to Vicodin, and he would take way too much Vicodin. I remember back in the day before I had moved out of state, and he used to take a lot of Vicodin, and then he would drink on top of it. And I always would tell him you shouldn't be doing that because you're mixing drugs, and it's just he was like a tank. He took too much, right? He took way more than he ever should have been taking. Past what the prescription recommendations were and all that, and on top of drinking. And so after I had moved, I had heard through the grapevine, since it was a small community, I heard from other people that he was doing heroin. He switched from Vicodin and started doing Oxycontins, and then after he probably couldn't get Oxycontin anymore, he switched over to heroin, and he was still drinking. And what had happened is so he was doing all that. He ended up hooking up with a girl and falling in love with her. Turns out she was a cop's daughter, which is an unusual circumstance for him to be a heroin addict and be dating a cop's daughter. I don't know how that worked out, but so he fell in love and he was doing a bunch of drugs, and what happened is that she broke up with him, broke his heart, and at the same time he was trying to recover from doing drugs, and he was having a hard time holding his job, and kind of like everything in his life was falling apart all at once. And that is the way that they get you. So from what I've seen is that if they want to make something look like an accident, whoever they are, that's just an easy way to put it, what they'll do to a man, because I don't know how they do it with a female counterpart, they like to get somebody addicted to something, so they'll offer somebody whatever. They'll offer them drugs, they'll offer them whatever that might get the person addicted to something and under control. And like I said, maybe they start with alcohol, then they work their way up to Vicodin, and then Oxycontin, and then they cut off the Oxycontin so the person's withdrawing, and they say something like, oh, well, look, we've got this, it's a lot cheaper, and then the person will try that, and then they'll be addicted to that, okay? And then all of a sudden, they went from alcohol, and they're doing heroin now. And one of the things that can happen to someone is when they break up with a woman, when a man or a woman will break up with somebody that they're in love with, there's something called cardiomyopathy. It's a broken heart. That's what it means. Cardiomyopathy means a broken heart. So there's a technical term, there's a medical term for dying of a broken heart. And that is no coincidence that is in the medical journals, that's in the medical field. There's a name for it, because you can die from a broken heart. Imagine if you were withdrawing from a hard drug like heroin, and then all of a sudden you have a broken heart, and then all of a sudden you lose your job, and then all of a sudden this happens, and then that happens, and then that happens. And so if you're not prepared for that, then that's something that can just basically kill somebody. And what happened to him is he ended up dying sitting upright in his bedroom, holding a pipe. And his mom found him, and my mom had to go over there and check to see if he was alive or what was going on with him. But yeah, he died in his mom's house in his bedroom, sitting up, holding his pipe. And so that is not the only time that I have seen that method be used to harm somebody to that extent. That is actually what I would call a system by which people use a method to remove somebody off of this planet. And I wanted to share that because it's something that needs to be known. People need to know that that's the method by which someone will make an accident look like it's an accident. And so when someone they can call it a suicide at that point. So the slow method is that you get them addicted to something, you work them up to something that's really nasty, whatever it may be, and then you hook them up with the girl or a guy, and then They get love bombed probably by a narcissist, because narcissistic love bombs cycles cause they hijack your endocrine system, and so you literally become physically addicted to the affection of your partner to the point where it's like a drug. And if you do the combination of that with getting somebody hooked on drugs, you've got a really, really nasty combination that can put someone in an early grave very, very fast. So I wanted to share that. That was something that I thought was very, very interesting and something worth sharing in my life, and something that people need to know. I think that's something important, that people need to know this so they don't fall prey to the same type of systems that I've seen happen. But yeah, just a synopsis of things that I've seen in my life. The dying at 27 in Hollywood thing, that is not an urban legend. I've seen it happen to my next door neighbor, and his mother was a I don't want to say a worshiper of Moloch, but she wore owl pendants, and she worked out of Hollywood. So, put the two and two together. And also the method by which people are taken out is obvious to me, is that they get them addicted to something. They get them hooked up with a narcissistic woman or a narcissistic man. They love bomb them to death, hijack their dopamine system in their body to where they become addicted to that person, and then they completely remove it, discard them, treat them like shit, and then they're an addict. And so the only way for them to feel good again is probably by upping the dosage of what they're taking. And if they're a heroin addict, then that's game over. As you can see in the last decade, we've had issues with fentanyl just killing massive amounts of people. Anyways, I hope this helps somebody save their life. It's something that I'm eternally grateful for him having been my one of like a little brother to me, and having him pass on this information to me unknowingly. I wish I could have thanked him before he passed on for all that he has given to me after he's gone. The only two things I have from him left is a do-rag and his corn pouch, right? Because he was half Native American, so I wear his corn pouch around every now and then, just as a memento, souvenir, and kind of like something to remind me of who I am and where I came from. So that's just a little bit about me and what I've experienced. My jail experience was hell, to say the least, and I would call it something equivalent to what you would call Dante's Inferno without pulling a girlfriend out of hell. But yeah, it was bad enough to where I had to take circumstances into my own hands to make sure that I wasn't put into an early grave the same way so many of my other friends had been put into an early grave the same way under other circumstances, whether it be car accidents, shotgun to the face, or overdoses, weird stuff like that. So yeah, that same jail, there's a guy that got put in solitary confinement, and he got deprived of water. They shut the water off in his cell, and he dehydrated to death. So that was the same people that were guarding me, the same correctional officers, same warden, same judges, same faculty. So that just so they had killed people in their prior by doing things like shutting the water off to their cell. Anyways, yeah, that's a little bit about my life and the things that I've endured, and the best way I can say it is that when you endure things like that, where you've been poisoned, you've almost died from disease, you've been beaten half to death, you've had what you would consider like the whole entire world after you and against you, as far as if you're in jail and you're having all that stuff happen to you, metaphorically speaking, that's the kind of thing where the whole world's kind of against you at that point. It's like you against the world when you're in that sort of situation. So it's important for me to just kind of give you a little bit of an analogy of who I am, and have a better understanding of where I'm coming from as a person, of the things that I've experienced in my life. These are events that were I would call life-changing and very, very shocking. And so that kind of explains what I would say what awakens ESP in people. And the same thing that unfortunately is what the government will do to children. They'll do, I have no idea what, but these are the things that they do to kids to awaken ESP. I hope this helps, and I hope that this enlightens you a little bit more. Have a good day, and thanks for listening if you made it this far.